They thought she came to learn. But she came to remember, and when they tried to break her, she reminded them who she was. The sun hung low over Halston Park, spilling orange light across the cracked concrete outside the East District Community Center. Inside, the old tile floors echoed with bouncing basketballs, the laughter of kids, and somewhere, the hum of a vending machine that hadn't worked in years. But back near the far wing, past the rec room behind the staff lounge, was the martial arts studio. And that's where it all started. A woman in her 50s walked through those doors for the first time in years. Her name was Maya Cross, a retired civil rights investigator, not a widow, and a black woman who had learned long ago that some fights never end, they just change form. Today, she wasn't looking for trouble, just healing, movement, breath, maybe something to help silence the ache that had followed her since losing Malik. But the moment she stepped onto the mat, the room changed, not for what she did, but for who she was. She could feel it in the sideways glances from the other students, mostly white, mostly men. Could feel it in the way the instructor, Sensei Cartervale, paused when he saw her, like her presence disrupted the air itself. "You must be new," he said with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Name?" "Maya," she said, voice steady. "Maya Cross." He raised an eyebrow. "Cross? Any relation to Derek Cross from city planning? My late husband." "Interesting," he muttered. Then louder, "Line up." The class snapped to formation like trained soldiers. Maya found herself in the back, near the wall, where the mirrors were cracked and the mat peeled at the corners. The warm-up began. Push-ups, jumping jacks, squats, all with Sensei Vale barking commands like he was still on a power trip from his years as a cop. Every correction aimed at her, every insult wrapped in a fake smile. Every drill a little longer, a little harder. When it was her turn, the others noticed. Some looked away, some smirked, but no one spoke, because in rooms like this, silence protects power, and power, in the wrong hands, becomes violence waiting for permission. The second class was worse. Maya arrived early, hoping a quiet stretch and a calm mind would make the air feel less heavy. But the locker room felt colder today, and she could feel it in her bones. Something was off. She changed into her navy tee and black workout pants, tied back her gray streaked hair, and stepped onto mat just as Sensei Vale marched in. He didn't greet anyone, didn't smile, just barked, "Line up," and then cross front and center. Maya froze for a moment, surprised, but stepped forward with dignity. Her movements were precise, grounded, but Vale circled her like a hawk, pacing slow and loud. "Let's see what our new student thinks she knows." He made her do the drills alone. Push-ups while the others rested. Horse stance held for minutes while he walked past, armed behind his back, making comments just loud enough for class to hear. Notice the defiance in her posture. Some people think their way of learning is better. Let's see how long that attitude holds. The students laughed nervously. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one said a word. And Maya, she didn't flinch, didn't give him the satisfaction. But inside, her hands were trembling. This wasn't about training. This was about control. He saw her skin before he saw her skill. He saw her quiet as weakness, her presence as challenge. Later that night, Maya sat in her car under the flickering parking lot light, gripping the leather journal her husband once gave her. She hadn't touched it in months, not since the funeral. But tonight, the words poured out, 2 classes in, and it already feels familiar. Not the training, the power games, the condescension, the coded language that tells you you're not welcome without ever saying out loud, "But I won't leave. I've walked into colder rooms. And I didn't survive this long just to back down now." She closed the journal with a slow breath. Her reflection in the rearview mirror was tired, but defiant. This fight was older than her, and far from over. Thursday came heavy. The Missouri air was thick with humidity, like the sky was holding its breath. Maya parked farther from the rec center this time, not because there wasn't space, but because she needed to walk, to breathe, to ground herself. The locker room was crowded now. New faces, crisp uniforms, women chatting in tight circles that fell silent when Maya entered. Polite nods, tight smiles, nothing real. She changed without a word, her hands steady, her eyes calm. But inside, a storm brewed. The dojo was packed tonight, 30 students, maybe more. And at the front, like a general before a drill, stood Sensei Vale. Only this time, something about his presence felt different. His uniform was darker, sleeker, and the smile on his face, that wasn't pride. That was anticipation. Tonight's lesson, he called out, is about self-defense in real-world situations. He paced like a storyteller, describing attacks in parking garages, muggings on dark streets, home invasions with violence and fear. Then his eyes locked onto hers, Ms. Cross. Front and center. Maya's pulse spiked, but her steps didn't show it. She walked steady to the front of class. The students quieted. Even the smirks faded. "Turn around," Vale said smoothly. "Don't worry. Just a demonstration." UST a demonstration. She turned, slowly. His voice dropped to a low, instructive tone. Common attack from behind. Rear chokehold. The moment his arm wrapped around her throat, Maya knew this wasn't instruction. It was punishment. His forearm tightened, cutting off her breath. His chest pressed close, and he spoke to the class as if nothing was wrong. "This is what a blood choke feels like. Cuts off circulation to the brain. You got about 3 seconds. 1 second. 2. 3. But the pressure didn't ease. Maya tapped his arm. No release. The room was dead silent. N01 moved. "Sometimes you gotta really want it." Vale chuckled, the sound vibrating against his spine. This wasn't training. This was domination. The edges of her vision blurred. Her lungs screamed. Memories of police tactics. Prison interviews. Cases she thought she'd buried. All crashed back. Then instinct took over. Drop weight. Shift hips. Elbow strike. Direct hit to the solar plexus. His grip loosened for a split second. And in that moment, Maya moved. Twist. Grip. Leverage. She flipped him clean over her hip, and Sensei Vale crashed the mat, hard, with a grunt that echoed through the dojo. The class gasped. He lay there wheezing, stunned. Maya didn't gloat, didn't speak. She simply walked to the edge of the mat, grabbed her bag, and left. Eyes followed her, but no one dared stop her. The women's locker room door swung open. Maya stepped inside, her breath still shallow, throat raw from a choke. She didn't change, just grabbed her gym bag and headed for the exit. But before she could leave, the door slammed open behind her. Sensei Vale stood in the doorway, his white uniform stained with sweat and ego. His face was twisted. Humiliation, fury, disbelief, all mixing into something dangerous. "You think you can walk away after that?" he barked. "You just assaulted an instructor." Maya didn't flinch. She backed away slowly, bag in hand, keeping distance. "This is the women's locker room, Carter. You need to leave." But he didn't. Instead, he lunged, grabbing for her uniform like a man trying to reclaim power. Big mistake. Maya stepped aside, let his momentum betray him, caught his arm mid-swing, a simple redirect. Textbook. He resisted, twisting violently, and with a sickening pop, his shoulder snapped out of place. He fell, tried to break his fall with the other hand. Crack. His wrist folded unnaturally beneath him, and then came the scream. High, sharp, desperate. Women from the hallway rushed in. Some froze, some whispered. Someone screamed, "Call 911." Maya stood still, bag over her shoulder, breathing deep. She didn't move toward him, didn't touch him again. She just watched. Carter Vale writhed on the floor, cursing through gritted teeth, body twisted, face pale. His power broken, not by violence, by consequence. Minutes later, medics arrived. Whispers turned to murmurs. Murmurs turned to stares. Some eyes glared at Maya. Others avoided her altogether. But she didn't speak, didn't explain. She walked out on her own terms. And the air outside? Cool, sharp, free. But it wouldn't stay that way for long. Because men like Carter Vale don't go down quietly. especially when the system that built them starts to crack. The morning light crept across the floor of Maya's kitchen. Steam rose from her untouched coffee. The mug, a gift from her late husband, read, "World's most patient investigator." Today, the patience was running thin. She hadn't slept, not after the locker room, not after the scream, not after watching a man who tried to choke her. Finally learned what it meant to be powerless. But the world outside, it didn't care what she survived. The knock came just after 9 a.m. Not a neighbor, not Simone, not someone checking in. 2 police officers, uniforms sharp, faces blank. One was black, the other Asian, but the badges made them look the same. "Ms. Cross? I'm Officer Neal. This is Officer Tran. We need you to come with us." Maya's spine straightened. "Do you have a warrant?" They handed her the paper. Assault, aggravated. Locker room. She exhaled once, slow, then turned around. Hand behind her back. The cold by the cuffs hit her wrists. The hallway outside filled with silent neighbors peeking through curtains. A few didn't even pretend to look away. The police car smelled of vinyl and old sweat. The ride downtown was quiet, except for the voice in her head whispering the same truth. They know who I am. They know what I've done. And they still chose to believe him. At the station, mugshot, fingerprints, shoes off, personal items bagged and labeled. And then a cell, not because she was dangerous, but because a black woman who fights back is always treated like a threat. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, a familiar voice echoed through the corridor. "Where is she?" "I'm her attorney." Carla Winston, Maya's longtime friend, brilliant and bold, with steel gray braids and stilettos sharp enough to pierce glass. "You okay?" she asked, rushing in. "I'm fine," Maya said calmly. "But I need to know what they're saying." Carla's eyes burned. Carter Vale filed charges. Claims you followed him into the locker room, that you attacked him. Maya laughed, dry, low. "And the 5 students who watched me walk away? They signed witness statements, all supporting his story." Carla sighed, unfolding paperwork. "They're painting you as unstable. A student who couldn't handle criticism. An angry black woman who snapped." Maya leaned back against the cold wall. Of course. Before long, Carla posted bail. They walked out together. Sunlight hitting Maya's face like a spotlight. Her shoulders dropped, but her spine stayed straight. Because something had shifted. This wasn't about a chokehold anymore. This was about erasure, rewriting the story so a predator stays protected and a survivor becomes suspect. Maya didn't plan to stay quiet, and she damn sure wasn't about to be erased. By the time the newspaper hit the front porches, the system was already shaking. Black belt broken trust. City-funded youth program accused of abuse, racism, and cover-up. That was the headline. But the story was deeper, darker, one only Maya Cross could tell, because she'd lived it. Inside the article were sworn statements from parents, bruised photos of kids in chokeholds, and a damning paper trail that stretched back years. The name Carter Vale wasn't just a martial arts instructor anymore. He was the centerpiece of a city-wide scandal, a former cop with a God complex, and the architect of a program that promised discipline but delivered trauma. The same program that tried to bury Jaleel Daniels, a straight-A student who vanished after being selected for Vale's elite training retreat. The same program that told black families, "Trust us, we'll keep your boys out of jail," only to lock them behind a different kind of cage. The backlash came fast. City Council called an emergency meeting. The mayor tried to backpedal. Officials scrambled to distance themselves from the nonprofit they'd all praised just months before. But Maya didn't stop. She stood in front of cameras, microphone shaking in her hand, eyes burning. This was never about discipline. It was about control, about silencing voices like mine. But we don't belong in cages. We belong in classrooms, boardrooms, leadership. And we're done being quiet. Her words lit a fire across the community. And then someone lit a real one. That night, Maya's car exploded in a wall of flame. Simone saw it first, from the front window of Maya's house. "Andy, your car!" She screamed. They rushed outside. Neighbors spilled into the street. Flames towered over the driveway, licking at the garage. Someone had doused it in accelerant, left a note, too, stuck to the mailbox in block letters. Drop it, or you're next. Firefighters arrived minutes later. By then, the car was a skeleton. The front of the house blistered from the heat. But Maya, she didn't move. She stood on her lawn, fists clenched, eyes locked on the blaze. They really did it, she whispered. They finally showed us who they are. The next morning, she walked into the city council chamber like a soldier walking into court. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just a navy blazer, a thick folder in hand, and the fire still smoldering behind her eyes. Simone walked beside her, now more than a niece, a survivor ready to speak. Behind them, parents, fathers who'd been silent too long, mothers whose sons had vanished into Vale's training retreat, teachers, activists, journalists, all ready to watch the reckoning unfold. The chamber was packed, wall to wall. Even the mayor looked like she hadn't slept in days. Maya stepped to the podium, cleared her throat, and began, "My name is Maya Cross. I was a student in Carter Vale's class. I was also a civil rights investigator for 20 years. And what I saw, what I experienced, was abuse, racial targeting, and a system that chose silence over justice." She laid the evidence bare. Photos of bruises, financial records showing misuse of taxpayer grants, court documents sealed by the same city that now claimed shock. And then came the testimonies. Simone, voice trembling, described how Vale choked her unconscious at 16 and left her in a locked equipment room for hours. How he told her black girls needed extra obedience. How he threatened to ruin her future if she spoke out. A mother named Rochelle Daniels wept as she held up a photo of her missing son, Jaleel. They said he was in leadership training, but he hasn't come home in 4 months. He's just 15. Each word sliced through the chamber like glass. Each voice peeled away the city's mask. The mayor tried to speak. Maya cut her off. "You funded this program. You ignored the warnings. You protected a man who weaponized his uniform, his belt, and his whiteness." By the time Maya sat down, the room had changed. People weren't whispering anymore. They were listening. Minutes later, the chamber doors swung open. Police entered. But this time, they weren't here for Maya. They were here for Carter Vale. Handcuffs, charges, and a silence that thundered louder than any explosion. The man who once demanded obedience was now being let out in front of the very people he once tried to break. Parents cheered. Kids cried. And in the crowd, Maya locked eyes with Simone. For the first time in months, they both smiled. That night, Maya sat in her burned driveway, journal on her lap, pen steady. "They tried to erase me. They burned my car, tried to break my voice. But we turned ashes into light. This fight isn't over, but we've cracked the silence. And now they have to listen." The building was old, an abandoned storefront on Kings Row, where broken glass once lined the sidewalks and hope came cheap. But to Maya and Simone, it was perfect. The rent was low. The bones were strong. And most of all, it was far away from Carter Vale's shadows. They called it Battle House. Not after war, but after what it takes to survive one that the community came out in waves. Parents painted walls. Teenagers laid down mats. Local artists donated murals of black leaders. Maya Angelou, Malcolm X, Serena Baldwin, all painted across fresh plaster like silent guardians. The kitchen in the back became a hub for warm meals and late-night talks. The side room became a therapy space. No judgment, no shame, just healing. And the main room, that's where movement returned. Real martial arts, real discipline, taught without fear. Where Simone, now a certified instructor, led kids through warm-ups every morning, her voice calm and firm. "Ground yourself. Breathe deep. You don't have to prove anything. You already belong here." The kids listened, because in this place they were safe. One afternoon, a small boy named Amir walked in. He couldn't have been more than 10. Didn't speak, didn't smile, just flinched whenever someone raised their voice. Maya watched him from the corner, then gently approached. "You ever trained before?" she asked softly. He shook his head. but his eyes said he needed something. By the end of the week, he was the first to show up every day. By the end of the month, he'd learned to meet Maya's gaze without fear. News spread. The same local paper that once told Maya's story returned, this time with cameras, not questions. From burned car to battle house, how one woman turned pain into power. That's what the headline read. But Maya didn't care for glory. She cared for results. She cared when Jaleel Daniels walked through her door one morning, thinner, quieter, still carrying shadows in his eyes. He didn't say much, just stood in the corner and watched the class. When it ended, Maya walked over, offered him tea. "You don't have to talk," she said, setting the mug down. "But when you're ready, we're here." He nodded once and stayed. That night, Simone and Maya sat on the steps of Battle House, sipping tea, watching kids play tag beneath the setting sun. "You think we're making a difference?" Simone asked. Maya looked at the mural painted above their door, a black girl in mid-kick, rising through smoke. Underneath the words, "We don't fight to destroy, we fight to build." She smiled. "We already are." Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Battle House, washing the blue mats in gold. The smell of breakfast, eggs, toast, cinnamon, floated in from the community kitchen. Kids laughed in the hallway. Someone played piano in the back room, and in the center of it all stood Maya Cross. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a founder. She watched as Simone, dressed in her crisp black GI, called the morning youth class to order. The children lined up in near-perfect rows, every shape, shade, and story among them. Some had fled abusive homes. Some had lost parents to the system. Some, like Jaleel Daniels, still carried invisible bruises. But all of them stood tall now. "Martial arts is not about violence," Simone said, her voice steady. "It's about boundaries, strength, dignity. You don't learn to fight to hurt others. You learn to protect the truth of who you are." They bowed, not in fear, but in respect. Across the room, Jaleel quietly moved through the warm-up drills, his posture still guarded, but his hands steady. He hadn't spoken much since returning. Too many days locked away in that so-called leadership camp Vale sent him to. Too many nights with fists, threats, and silence. But today, for the first time, he smiled. A small thing. But to Maya, it was everything. The world outside Battle House was still messy. Carter Vale sat in jail awaiting sentencing. For city officials had resigned. The mayor? Gone. Investigations were expanding across counties. But Maya knew how systems worked. They didn't break all at once. They cracked slowly, through pressure, through fire, through witness, through refusal. That afternoon, she sat on the front steps of the building, watching the neighborhood breathe again. Kids rode bikes past boarded-up stores. A woman walked her daughter to school, hand in hand. The same community that once whispered, "Don't cause trouble," now shouted, "Protect our children. Protect our future." A young reporter from a college paper approached Maya with a notebook. "Ms. Cross, just one question. If you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?" Maya thought for a long time, then said quietly, "Power doesn't always come with badges or belts. Sometimes it comes in silence. And sometimes it comes in a woman who refuses to be silent ever again." That quote made the front page of a dozen more papers. But for Maya, the real legacy wasn't in headlines. It was in every child who walked through the doors of Battle House and left knowing they mattered. It was in every mother who stood up and said, "Not my child. Not again." It was in the mural on the side of the building, freshly painted after the arson. A phoenix rising from flames, arms wide, skin dark and brilliant. Above it, for simple words, "We fight. We heal. We rise."